Okay, so reviewing from yesterday, phloem transports? Sugar. Okay, what force does it use?
Gravity.
Gravity, because it's going down. Okay, and what does the xylem transport? Okay, what are the forces involved in that? Right. Hydrogen bonds, cohesion and adhesion keep it from falling down. What actually pulls it up? Osmosis, right. As water evaporates through the stomates, water's left behind in the spongy layer, or sorry, not water, salt is left behind in the spongy layer. Okay, that salt can do two things. It creates an osmotic pressure that pulls water up the xylem. It also can affect what cells? Guard cells on the stomate, right? That salt concentration can pull the water out of their vacuoles, okay, and cause the stomates to close, right? So that kind of serves two purposes. It helps bring more water up, but when that supply of water coming up starts to dwindle, there's enough salt in there that the stomates will close. All right, what we're looking at today, factors that influence the growth of a plant a little bit, okay? But our main focus is going to be growth and development of the plant. Okay, so what kinds of things does a plant need to have? What kind of things does it need to respond to? And how does it do that from kind of a biochemical standpoint? Okay, so first off, let's brainstorm. What are some resources that a plant would need? Water, light, carbon dioxide. Awesome. Okay, so sunlight, okay, water, CO2, what else?
Minerals from the soil.
Minerals and nutrients from the soil. Okay, here's one I sometimes get people with on a multiple choice question. Does a plant need oxygen? Okay, I mean, in the end, it needs oxygen, but it can make it for itself, right? It's waste. The waste product of photosynthesis is oxygen. So lots of people will say, no, a resource it needs from its environment is oxygen. Nope, it can make it for itself as long as it gets carbon dioxide and water from its environment. Okay? So it's one of those ones where you got to read it carefully, right? If I ask what are some resources a plant needs from its environment, oxygen would not be one of them because it makes that for itself from the other raw materials. Okay, so those are raw materials. What about, are there any conditions that a plant would need in order to thrive? That one's a little harder. Are the plants outside growing very much right now? Why not? It's too cold. Yeah. Why do plants go dormant when it's cold? How do you transport water if it's in a solid form? I'm pretty sure there's no way that ice will move up the xylem due to osmotic pressure, okay? So I would say temperature would be another condition that would be necessary for plants to thrive. Okay? In fact, what we're going to learn about today is that plants actually prepare for this. Okay? I mean, plants haven't had leaves on them around here for close to a month now. Okay? Why do they lose their leaves? I mean, obviously winter is coming, but like if you still have leaves on when winter hits, what's still inside the xylem? Water. What happens to water when it freezes?
Expands.
Yeah, okay, I found this out the hard way the other day. Okay? Well, for about like the 20th time. Okay? Apparently my fridge has no temperature control anymore. Okay? And yeah, definitely water expands when it freezes. I'm sure we've all done this at some point. I opened up my fridge and this thing just fell out because obviously it can't sit on the rounded end. Okay? Water expands when it freezes. So you've got all these tiny little tubes inside. They're full of water. If that water freezes, they're shattered. Okay? I mean, Water, when it freezes, can break rocks. Okay? Tiny little microscopic tubules are no problem at all, okay, to break when water expands. Right? So we got to get the water out of a plant in preparation for a long, cold winter. Right? It's not good to have it in there. All right, so those are factors, obviously, that can affect plant growth. Okay, what hormones are responsible for growth and development in plants? Believe it or not, plants make hormones similar to what animals make. Okay, not obviously the same hormones. So plants don't need estrogen and testosterone and insulin. Okay, but they need other things that help them to grow and regulate and things like that. Okay, and the third point is one we'll talk about quite a bit. Plant shape isn't fixed. Okay, it's not genetically pre-programmed into a plant. Okay, it is the result of the interaction of environmental factors and growth responses. Okay, now you're going to find out why I keep these two plants in my classroom. These plants are older than you guys are. Okay, they've been in here for a very, very long time, and I have tormented them the entire time they have been in here. They're the same species. They're not genetically identical, but they're exactly the same species of plant. Why does that one have growth only on one side, and that one is even all the way around? Okay, it does have something to do with the light, for sure. I mean, obviously, this plant is right next to the window, right? It wants to grow towards its food source, which is the window. That one wants to grow towards its food source. Okay, why is it full all the way around? I'll remind you that I torment these plants. Okay? That plant there has never been moved. It has always been oriented with that side facing the window. That plant gets turned 90 degrees every time I water it. So it grows towards its light source, and then I go, and I turn it 90 degrees, and I make it grow from the other side towards the window, and I turn it 90 degrees. Okay? Every time I water it, I rotate it a little bit, so it's nice and full and even all the way around. Plants have to respond to their environment. Animals do to an extent, but if the conditions in an animal's environment get really bad, what can the animal do? Leave. Animals are mobile. Plants are not. They're rooted to one location for life. Okay? They're not like the Lord of the Rings. Okay? They're not like Treebeard and they can just take off and go whenever they please. Okay? They're stuck in one spot. They have to change their growth in response to what the environment does. Okay? So far more than animals, their final shape is not pre-programmed. Their ability to respond is genetically pre-programmed, but their final shape is not. For animals, like for human beings, our final shape is pre-programmed. We are going to have 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 toes, 8 fingers, and 2 thumbs. Okay? That's genetically pre-programmed into our shape. Okay? Now, if I had an identical twin, okay, and we both grew up not knowing each other, by the time we were adults, would we still look pretty much the same? Pretty much. Okay, I mean, if we had really radically different environments, we might look a little bit different. Okay, but genetically speaking, we got a lot of things in common. Okay, did I ever tell you guys the story of my grandfather? Okay, my grandfather is an identical twin. Okay, he and his brother grew up and then had a falling out. They didn't speak to each other for almost 20 years. When they finally reconciled, they had both married short women with curly hair who giggled incessantly and told really lame jokes, who were both named Evelyn, and they bought identical 1968 candy apple red Ford Galaxies. Hadn't spoken to each other in 20 years. Okay? Mother Nature is a mad scientist, man. Okay? Genetics can account for a lot. Now, there'd certainly be an argument in that they grew up in the same household and were influenced by the same things. But I mean, come on. Their wives had the same name, and they looked a lot alike, and they acted a lot alike, and they bought the same car. Okay? But those two plants, which share arguably about the same amount of genetic material, look quite a bit different. Okay? All I have to do is put them in different environments. Okay? They have to respond to that environment. Okay? All right. So, this is what we were just talking about. Plants are rooted to one location. They have to endure. They have to persist in that location. Right? They cannot get up and move. So, they can change their shape to respond. Like these plants. Okay? Are these trees, they all have, well, they don't all the ones in the foreground have this shape. Okay? The ones in the background, further back, are all straight, but all of the ones in the foreground have this weird bend in them. Okay? Obviously, that's not a pre-programmed shape for the species. Trees generally go straight and up. Why are all these trees so weird? What could have happened? The principals actually walked by in period 1 when I had this slide on, and they were so intrigued, they opened the door to come in to find out how they looked that way. Okay, any ideas? A flood. When these trees were small, there was a flood. Floods deposit large amounts of very fine, silty debris. That knocked all of these trees over, but they would have had a few leaves sticking out of the mud. Okay? Those leaves could see the sun. Okay? They started to grow back up and over their roots. Okay? A subsequent flood, when these trees were much bigger, washed away the debris and revealed the curve. Okay? How do you adapt to your environment when you can't move? You change your growth. Okay? What about this tree? That's a pretty funky shape. Okay? It's growing right out of the rock, as we often see spruce trees do. What could have made it have that big hairpin turn in it? Yeah. Okay. This tree, there used to be more rock over here. Okay, but maybe in a frost event or something, some water got down in the crack, expanded, pushed a big chunk of rock, fell off. Tree fell like this. Okay, so the tree would have been pointed downwards. Now, light wouldn't have been a problem for that tree, right? I mean, there's nothing there to shade it. It's all by itself. Why wouldn't it just keep growing this way if light wasn't a problem? Why would it go, no, it's better to do this and come back over my roots? Yeah. Plants know which way is up and down. And they have sort of a sense of balance. Okay? If this tree had continued to grow this way, would all of its weight have been trying to pull its roots out of the rock? If you bend and turn back over your roots, do you change the direction that force pulls? You do, and you become more stable. And generally, plants know that light is up. Okay? So they know which way is up. They'll generally grow that way because it's the safest bet for getting to light. If they're growing that way and there's no light, then they'll change to light. Light's always first, okay? Because light's their food. Sort of make sense? So plants can respond to things that happen in their environment by changing their growth, whereas animals respond to changes in their environment by going somewhere else, or staying if it's a good change. All right. Why are those plants doing that? What's on the right? The sun. There's a window on the right. Of course the plants are going to grow towards the window. It's like you going to a buffet. Okay? Of course you're going to walk towards the buffet. It's food. Okay? So they have all of their photosynthetic organs, their leaves are oriented to face the window because that's going to get them the most energy, allow them to do the most growth. Are they going to grow that way forever? They might change a little bit once they get close to the window. Like if they actually make contact with the window, they'll probably change and grow straight up the window. Okay, you wouldn't want to keep trying to grow horizontally through the window. You'd probably change and start going up again. Okay, but this early in their life, I mean, they're just sprouts. Okay, they're going to grow towards their light source. Okay. That is actually called phototropism. Okay? The prefix photo means light, right? We talk about photosynthesis, photoautotrophs. Okay? Photo means light. Tropism means growth or growth pattern. So phototropism is a growth pattern in response to light. Positive phototropism is growth towards it. Negative phototropism would be growth away. You don't see that very often unless the light source is incredibly harsh. Okay? Then you might see a plant actually turn away a little bit. Okay, there are actually 3 responses that can lead to a plant doing a tropism. Okay? Phototropism is the dominant one because that's its food source. There's also geotropism. Okay? What does geo mean? Earth. Yeah. What does the earth produce that a plant could respond to? Could be nutrients. Gravity. Geotropism is actually the growth response to Earth's gravity. Okay? Geotropism is usually negative. Negative geotropism means I grow away from the pull of gravity, okay? Which means up. Up's a good bet. If you don't know where the sun is, like maybe you're a plant that's growing in a really thick forest, okay, but you're really small, you can't see the sun, up's a good bet. Okay, so geotropism would guide you to grow up because generally that's where you'll find the light. The third one that we'll talk about is thigmotropism. Thigmotropism is a growth response to touch, positive or negative. Okay, so I was showing you the little brown nubs on that plant over there, okay, that they can use to grow into something. That would be positive thigmotropism. Ivy growing up a wall, positive thigmotropism. Okay, peas, like climbing a pea fence, okay, or like honeysuckle or anything like that, where they wrap the little tendrils around, that's thigmotropism. It's a growth response to touch. Bamboo does it as well. Okay, anybody ever see those bamboo that look like they have like a coil in them? Okay, you know how they do that? Bamboo grows really fast. So what they do is they put a pipe right beside the piece of bamboo, and they just keep tying the bamboo to the pipe, and it'll keep turning. And then they just take the pipe out and sell you this piece of bamboo, okay, with the coil in it. It's just thigmotropism. You could do it yourself at home, okay, with a piece of plastic pipe and some twist ties. Okay, it grows pretty fast. All right, so making sense? So tropisms, we'll talk, I don't know if we'll get to them today. I didn't in period 1, so I don't suspect that we will either. But tropisms are growth responses to environmental cues, light, gravity, touch. And what we're going to talk about is more the mechanism of those, the hormones that are involved in growth. Okay, so there's 5 major classes of plant hormones that we will talk about. There's more plant hormones than that, but we're just going to talk about the main ones. Okay, what do you suppose all those little sprouts are growing in response to? Phototropism, yeah. The light source is obviously over here on the right. What's up with that dude in the back? Why is he poking straight up? Well, he's the last one, right? He's way in the back. Would he be able to see the light? So what's his best bet? Up. Okay. All these other ones, okay, these ones here, these like this one and this one, they probably started growing straight up, but then got to where they could see the light and grew towards the light. If the light source is right here, this guy hasn't found it yet. Okay, he's going to grow straight up until he can see the light and then grow towards the light. Okay. So, first group of plant hormones that we'll talk about are called auxins. Auxins cause cells to get longer, okay, which then of course results in the plant getting longer. Okay, so all of these cause elongation or lengthening of the plant. Now, plant hormones are chemically very similar to animal hormones. Okay? They cause a response in the cells. They do whatever it is that that hormone signals for. So for auxins, they signal for elongation. Plants produce, normal amounts of this stuff, in the same way that you produce normal amounts most of the time of certain hormones. If you have an imbalance of certain hormones, can that be worrisome? Right? Like if you have hyperthyroidism, okay, you produce more TSH and thyroxine and things like that, which can affect your metabolism. Okay? Or if you're hypothyroid, okay, that means you don't produce as much of those things. Right? People that are hyperthyroid tend to use up a lot more of their calories. They tend to have like a high metabolism. Okay? People who are hypothyroid tend to not produce as much and have a lower metabolism. Okay? Which can often lead to weight gain, and it can happen pretty quickly. What if you inject yourself with extra hormones? Can that have health effects? Okay, what kind of hormones do people typically inject? What's that? Testosterone, yeah. Okay, or human growth hormone, okay, things like that. Okay, those are performance enhancing drugs. Okay, if you inject those into your body, you're putting them in your body in higher levels than normal. Now, that has certain effects, right? Testosterone affects secondary male sexual characteristics. So, broader muscles, more hair growth, deeper voice, okay, things like that. So if you're an athlete and you're trying to put on muscle mass, testosterone can help you do that, because that's one of the things that testosterone naturally does. But if you pump it into your body in larger amounts, it happens a lot faster. Yeah. Okay. But if you're putting it in your body in a higher amount than normal, that can be hard on other parts of your body, like your liver. Okay? Breaking down hormones produces toxic chemicals. If your body's got normal amounts of that, that's fine. That's what the liver's for. It can clean that stuff up. But if you're putting it in way higher amounts than is normal, it's very hard on your liver and kidneys to get rid of all that extra toxins. It also has another effect. If you've got higher than normal levels of a hormone in your body knows it. Okay? And it'll send a counter signal to the glands that produce that hormone, and it'll tell them stop. Okay? You already have too much. Stop producing, stop producing. Meanwhile, the glands that normally are producing that hormone are like, we're not doing anything. Like, stop yelling at us. Okay? Now, eventually what that'll cause is that gland will generally shrink. Think about it. Okay? If you're a guy, what gland produces testosterone? If you're injecting that into your body in large amounts, it'll keep getting the signal to stop doing that. Okay? Now, if that produces certain, effects in your body, bigger muscles, stronger, more hair growth, stuff like that, what if you put that into a person that doesn't normally produce it? Will it have the same effect? Okay? If a woman takes testosterone, will it still have the same effect it has on a man? Yep, it absolutely will. Okay? They discovered this back in the 80s because the Soviets had their massive athletic doping program. Okay? Every single athlete was on testosterone. Okay? The men were hulking, huge monsters, very strong, and so were the women. Okay? If you look at the pictures of the Soviet women's swim team, okay, they looked a little mannish because they were taking all these male hormones, okay, and it was producing all those same effects, but in a person that wouldn't normally produce it. Okay, it's actually what people who are transitioning do now. Okay, if you're transitioning to a different gender, you take the hormones of that gender to help the process along. Okay, hormones are just chemicals. Your body just reacts to them. Okay, if you're taking ones that you don't normally produce, it still has the same effect. Okay, whether your body naturally produces those hormones or not, your body knows what to do with them. Okay, sort of makes sense? If you take too much though, that's not a good thing. Okay, and we learned that as well with plants. Okay, so these two pictures here, this one and this one, are a before and an after. Okay, And they were taken in Vietnam in 1970. What was going on in Vietnam in 1970? War, yeah. And that war went very, very poorly for the Americans. Okay, they were fighting a highly motivated, well-prepared enemy who knew their own territory very well. And that territory was jungle. Okay, there are lots of places to hide in the jungle. All right, so they would pop out of nowhere, tunnel system, out of the trees, whatever, and ambush the Americans. And of course, they didn't like that very much. Nobody likes getting killed. So they went back to the CIA mostly and said, hey, look, we're getting ambushed. We're getting pretty tired of it. And it's all because of this stupid jungle. Can you do something about it? So the CIA is like, nuclear weapons? And they're like, yeah, there's a lot of innocent civilians in there, so yeah. No, nuclear weapons, not really an option. Carpet bombing? No, again, that whole civilian problem. No, we can't just carpet bomb the entire country. Napalm? We'll burn it down. Again, innocent civilians. We can't just set everything on fire. All right. Nobody ever lets us have any fun. Okay, and they went off and they developed something that would kill the trees. And all it was a synthetic auxin. They sprayed it on the trees, the leaves absorbed it through the stomates, and the trees grew themselves to death. Okay, in the span of a few weeks, it went from healthy jungle to that. Anyone know what that chemical was called? They had a code name for it. Agent Orange. You can see why. Okay, it just killed trees. And it was exceedingly good at it, right? But within like a month or two, they had this stuff ready to go. They had already equipped helicopters with big tanks and spray nozzles that could just fly over the jungle and spray this stuff, okay? And in kind of a darkly humorous way, they put Smokey the Bear on the side of all of the spray helicopters. What is Smokey the Bear's saying? Only you can prevent forest fires, except they didn't make fires. Only you can prevent forest. Kind of dark. That's what they actually wrote on the side of that spraying helicopters. Only you can prevent forest. Okay? And they went out and sprayed all this stuff. Okay? Now, they thought they had developed something that would just kill trees. The problem was it causes rapid cell growth. Not division, but rapid cell growth in plants. What did it cause in people? Cancer. Yeah, their soldiers, the civilian populace, the livestock, all of it. Okay, inhaling that caused cancerous tumors to form. Okay, now we actually still use this chemical. They spray it on the dandelions in town all the time. Okay, that same chemical kills broad-leafed weeds. It has no effect on grass. Okay, grass's blades doesn't work the same, doesn't absorb it, but broad-leafed plants like dandelions and thistle suck it in and they're dead. Anyone see what the dandelions look like after they spray them? They get all like long and coily because they're doing exactly what this hormone is meant to do. Lengthen all the cells rapidly. Okay? But that growth is so rapid, they can't carry out enough photosynthesis or pull in enough water and nutrients to support it. But the signal is grow, 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 and they just grow themselves to death. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, another thing that auxins can be used for is to produce seedless fruit. Okay, a very light dusting of this stuff onto the flower will actually trick a plant into thinking it's been pollinated. Okay, so the normal reason to produce fruit is to protect a seed, right? So here's the birds and the bees of plants. Okay, pollen grains. Okay, the stuff that most people are allergic to, that actually contains plant sperm. Every pollen grain has a plant sperm in it. Okay, when that lands, so if you have a flower, there's usually that kind of middle piece that sticks up. It's called the stigma. Okay, if a pollen grain lands on that, okay, that's the female part of the flower. So when the pollen grain hits that, it dissolves, and the plant sperm will go from the stigma down the style, and at the bottom of that is the ovary. Okay, so flowers are actually the reproductive organs of plants. Okay, so at the base of that is the ovary. When the egg inside the ovary is fertilized, the flower falls off and fruit forms around the seed, around the embryo. That's what's in the seed, is an embryonic plant. Okay? So the purpose of fruit is to surround the seed in some sort of nutrient-rich medium. Okay? That's going to happen in one of two ways. The fruit will get eaten and then pooped out, and the seed will be in there, and it'll be deposited in a nutrient-rich medium where it can grow. Or the fruit will fall off and rot and release all of the nutrients, and the seed again has a nutrient-rich medium. Okay? There are actually some plants in the world that their seed has to go through the digestive tract of animals before it can germinate. Okay? There's actually a tree growing in the rainforest that is going to go extinct because its seeds have to pass through the digestive tract of a dodo bird. And the dodo is extinct. These trees will go extinct. They are so intricately linked, okay, that the digestive enzymes of no other organism will do. Okay? That's pretty rare, but generally speaking, okay, going through the digestive tract of an animal will remove like a covering of the seed and make it ready to go. Okay? All right. Okay, moving on here. Okay, cytokinins are the next one. Cytokinins cause cytokinesis, which is cell division. Okay, so cytokinesis is important. We need cells to divide because sometimes we need to replace cells that have been damaged, or they got sick, or they just got old and died, okay? And we need to replace them. So cytokinins cause cell division, which can then replace, okay, or grow new tissue. Right? This is why there are many plants that can live so long. Okay? The oldest living organism in the world is the Methuselah tree. Okay, this thing grows in a secret location in California. It's 6,000 years old. Okay, it's a pretty long time for a living organism to live. Okay, and it can do that because it's constantly replenishing and replacing cells that have been damaged or died or whatever. Okay, so just stimulates cytokinesis or cell division. Okay, immediately upon discovery of this, there were attempts to replicate it in animals, but what's the problem with rapid cell division in animals?
Cancer.
It's cancer. Yeah. Okay. Basically, every lab animal that was tested, yeah, never got to human testing. Okay. It's just not something that can really be replicated in animals. We don't really have an equivalent to this hormone. Okay. All right. So if we're looking at plants here, like by comparison, okay, plant A here would be kind of your normal or what they call wild type plant. Okay, but plant B has more cytokinins. So you'll see that the leaves aren't quite as big, but there are more of them, and there's obviously more flowers than there are in plant A. Okay, that's more tissue. And you can see on the right there, okay, this would again be your wild type plant. Okay, those leaves are just dying off, but this plant is replacing them. Okay, okay? So cytokinins cause cell division. Okay, keeps a plant young, basically. All right, so gibberellins. Gibberellins are not a hormone we talk about very often because they usually just work in concert with other things. So basically they're almost never going to be the right answer to a question because they don't do much on their own. Okay, but we do talk about them because they have a role to play. Okay, they can stimulate flowering, and they're part of the germination process of a seed. So it's how the starches and things like that in a seed are released so that it can feed the embryo and get the plant going. Okay. They can also affect the stem in certain types of plants, especially in rice. Okay. This is actually how gibberellins were kind of discovered, or how their role was discovered. Okay. In China, rice is a huge crop. right? They grow it in all those flooded fields, right, in the rice paddies. Well, flooded conditions are prime conditions for fungi to grow. Okay? And they had problems with some of their rice getting what they called foolish seedling disease. Okay? The foolish seedling disease would cause rice plants to grow really fast, tall, but make no secondary growth, like the increase in girth to support that foliage that's above. So the plants would grow really fast, fall over and die, okay, because they wouldn't be able to support the weight of the plant above because they didn't get thicker. All right? So plant on the left, normal rice. Plant on the right, foolish seedling disease. It was actually caused by a fungus that grew on the roots and stimulated overproduction of gibberellins. Plants would get long stems and then not be able to support their weight, fall over and die. Okay? So gibberellins, okay, if they can cause obviously increased flowering, right? It says it triggers flowering. The more flowers you have, the more fruit you're going to have. Okay, because every flower is going to produce a fruit. Okay, abscisic acid, this is an important one, especially for plants that live in our part of the world. Okay? Plants that experience distinct seasons, summer, winter. Okay, give you a minute to write a couple of things down there. Okay, I'll scroll it up so you can see all of it. Anything that's underlined, that's going to be important. Okay, so abscisic acid is important for preparing a plant for dormancy. Okay. Around here, plants and the trees, they lose their leaves every September. This year's September was pretty nice, right? It was pretty warm. It was warm well into October. Why not keep your leaves on and grow a little bit more? Why do they lose them in September no matter what? What's happening in September always? Sun goes down earlier. Days are getting shorter. Okay? Plants know how much photosynthesis they're carrying out. And if they're detecting a drop in it, they know the days are getting shorter. Days getting shorter means winter is coming. You don't want to have water running in the xylem when it freezes. Okay? So length of day is what usually triggers the release of abscisic acid. Okay? It's more reliable than change in temperature. Because like I said, this year we had kind of an abnormally warm fall. Okay? The plants could have easily kept their leaves longer, but they don't want to take that chance. Length of day reliably signals that winter is coming. So the further from the equator you get, the more important this hormone becomes. Okay? If you live near the equator, does your length of day change? It doesn't. If you live in the tropics, you've got 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of darkness every day. You don't even make this hormone. There's no point in going dormant. Okay? Unless you're in a part of the world where there's a definite rainy and then a really dry season, they might go dormant before a drier season. Okay? But for plants around here, it's length of day that triggers this. Now, the way it works is abscisic acid disrupts the chloroplast's ability to make chlorophyll. Okay? The acidic conditions produced by it don't allow chlorophyll to form. If chlorophyll doesn't form, then photosynthesis can't be carried out, and the plants lose their green color. Right? What we see instead are the kind of supportive pigments, the oranges, the yellows, and the reds instead. Okay? They can, produce some sugars for the plant, but they can't do it on their own. Okay? And so as a result, the plant stops moving water. There's no photosynthesis, there's no water needed, okay? Which empties out the xylem, the leaves dry up, fall off, tree is ready for winter. Okay, sort of makes sense, right? Because you definitely want to shed your leaves before it freezes. Okay? Like, have you ever seen what happens like a tomato plant, or if you got plants in your garden, if it frosts on them, right? They're all like slimy after that. Okay? And the reason for that is the water in the vacuoles goes solid, and it makes sharp little crystals that puncture the water vacuole, puncture the cell membranes, and the contents of the cell, the cytoplasm just leaks out. Okay? Those cells are dead. Okay? Obviously, you don't want that going on if you like living. Okay? But if you're an annual, that means you only grow for one season, that's not that big a deal, right? You're not going to grow the next year anyway. Okay, so does that make sense? So what we need to know there is the role that abscisic acid plays, prepares plants for dormancy, and how it does that, stops chlorophyll production. All right, and then ethylene. Okay? Ethylene is a gas. We still call it a hormone, but it's a gas. Okay? And it's produced, and it causes fruit to ripen. Okay? It also can help trigger the release of abscisic acid, okay? Because obviously you get your plants or your fruit near the end of your growing season. Okay, what fruit produces the most ethylene? Guesses?
Bananas.
Bananas. Yeah, when you guys start buying your own groceries, you're going to realize why we have something called the banana principle. The banana principle says this: if you buy bananas when they're green, you will eat them before they're ripe. If you buy them when they're yellow, they'll be brown before you eat them. Okay? Bananas produce so much ethylene that they can go from green to rotten in a week. Okay? Ethylene causes this rapid ripening process. Okay? It's basically a conversion of starches into sugars. That's why non-ripened fruit is bitter, okay? Whereas ripened fruit is sweeter. Okay? It's releasing all of that stuff, okay? And getting it ready to be a supportive medium for the seeds. Okay? Ironically, bananas don't have seeds in them, but okay. So yeah, they can produce the most ethylene. Now, does that mean you should store anything near your bananas? Not if you like it not rotten. Okay, if you store any other fruits near your bananas, they are going to ripen and rot very, very quickly. Apples and strawberries, same thing. They also produce a lot of ethylene. Okay, so if you're putting them in like the fridge, I wouldn't put other fruit next to something in the same drawer. Okay, they're going to produce ethylene, and then they're going to work against each other, and they'll be rotten very quickly. Keep them separate. Okay, with bananas, it's better to hang them. Okay, if anyone has one of those like hooks, right, you hang them up. That way air circulates underneath and can carry the ethylene away. Ethylene is heavier than air. Okay, if you put bananas in a bowl, the ethylene will sit in the bowl with the bananas and they'll ripen more quickly. Okay, I actually used to use this when we used to grow our own tomatoes. Okay, because I would always want to make either salsa or sauce out of them, so I wanted them all ripe at the same time. And in Canada, you usually have to pick your tomatoes when they're still green to protect them from getting frozen. So I would put all the green tomatoes in a box with a couple of apples. Okay, the apples would release ethylene, it would be trapped in the box, and all of the tomatoes would get ripe around the same time. Okay, and then I can make sauce with them. I wouldn't have half that are green and half that are red. Okay, they would just all ripen together. Right? Little thing you can use, practical thing. There actually was, for a while, they stopped making them because there was probably something toxic about them, but there were these green bags, and they were advertised on TV all the time. Buy these bags because they absorb ethylene gas. You can put your produce in there, and it'll last for weeks because it'll absorb the ethylene, and the ethylene won't get a chance to work on the produce and rot it. And they worked. But there obviously was something else in those bags that was being absorbed or produced by that process that probably wasn't good for you because you can't find them anywhere anymore. But the science behind it was solid. You could put bananas in those bags and they would last for weeks, okay? Which is highly unusual. All right, making sense? Okay, so that's what ethylene can do. Okay, it causes the ripening of fruit and natural aging. So sometimes the release of abscisic acid. Okay. you know what, I think we'll leave it there. We'll talk about tropisms on Tuesday, because on Monday, we're starting the plant growth lab and the quiz. Okay, so Tuesday we'll pick up here with tropism.